Hey guys, Octane Restorations. We're back with a GL1500 tutorial. This is going to be how to rebuild that rear air shock. As you can see on the screen, if you're doing this as preventative, don't tilt it. Otherwise the fluid in the dampener can leak out. It's kind of hard to put back in place, but all of my fluid had leaked out, which is why I'm rebuilding this. And I wanted to explore this option instead of just buying a new one. The seal is only about 20 bucks, so that was also a factor whenever a new shock system, you're looking at anywhere from $100 to $300. And I couldn't find anything on the forums how to rebuild these, so going off the manual and seeing what I can do, this is it. So there's that stopper ring right there, and the first thing you have to do is get that stopper ring. Right here, I'm using a little pick and a screwdriver. My stopper ring was wedged in there. Sometimes it can happen if someone tried to rebuild it before. There is the metal backup ring though in there that you'll see later in the video. If you push down that metal backup ring, sometimes you're able to get the stop ring out, if yours isn't wedged in there. Like as you can see, that's what happened with mine. It just got bound in there and I was not able to get it out. But there's a metal ring in there underneath the stopper ring. If you're able to, you can push down on that and get the stopper ring out easier. But since mine had been jammed, this is how we had to do it. Again, I'm using a screwdriver and a pick. Be very, very careful not to scratch that smooth cylinder, the inside of the shock. If so, fluid will leak out of it, and that just destroys the purpose of trying to rebuild it. So I'm doing some nice gentle taps, using both of them kind of like a wedge, just to get that stopper ring out. Again, my stopper ring was pressed into the metal. Yours shouldn't be, hopefully not. Hopefully there's just a metal ring on the inside of the stopper ring, and you just got to press it down and the stopper ring will come out. But since mine was jammed, this is the method I had to use. I hope yours is not as difficult as that was. There was that stopper ring, and we got it out. You got to use some pressure to separate the two parts of the cylinder from each other and to blow that seal out. Air pressure isn't high enough. You know, this is an air shock. I tried with, I think, 175 psi of air, and it didn't work. Honda actually makes an oil seal remover pump, but the only ones I could find for sale were like 150 bucks. It just attaches to that fitting and you just pump it up and it actually presses that seal out. But I'm trying to do this to save money, so I'm not going to spend $150 on a pump. If you look at the 88 GL1500 shop manual though, it actually tells you to use like a shop press to blow that seal out. So that's what we're going to do today. Again, we're just filling it with water. Water's a non-compressible fluid. You know, in a perfect world, you would want to use Honda's SS7 suspension fluid for this, or ATF, but that's a lot of fluid and that'd get expensive. So I'm just using a non-compressible liquid water. Once you get it nice and full, I'm wrapping a towel in a bag over it to catch all of that liquid, especially if you're inside the shop you want to do this. This is just to keep things, you know, nice and clean. Next, you're going to need this fitting on the end of your air hose, if your motorcycle is equipped with one. I'm going to show you how to get to that right now. So it should be on your right saddlebag. Should be a 10mm, I believe. To remove that, and you need a 12mm wrench. For this method, you could use a bolt. That's the right size to fit in there. The reason that it calls for this fitting is because you put this fitting on it and then you remove the valve stem and you use that oil seal pump that Honda sells. That's the part that actually screws into the fitting. But with this method, we're just going to use a shop press to get it out. So technically you don't need this fitting, you could just use a bolt that fits. But instead of using a bolt, you can use this fitting, and I just wanted to make y'all aware of this. You don't want it too tight right here. You don't want to put the wrath of God in it. You just want it nice and snug. So this is that seal remover pump I was telling you about. So it just screws onto that fitting, and you can just use that to press that out. But again, the only ones I could find were $150 or so. And like I said earlier, in the 88 GL1500 shop manual, it says use a press to blow that seal out. I don't have a hydraulic press, but all a hydraulic press is a jack and a piece of metal that won't give. And I've got this F250 and I've got a jack. So the F250 is the piece of metal that's not going to give. And so all I'm doing is I'm compressing it till the pressure builds up and it'll blow that seal out. And again, make sure your stopper ring is out before this. So there's that metal backup ring, the one that my stopper ring was wedged inside to. And there's just a diagram of it. You have your guide bushing, your oil seal, and then your backup ring, and then your stopper ring. But the stopper ring should have already been removed at this point. So on the right side you got the metal backup ring, in the middle you have the seal, which is what we're going to be replacing, and then the ring on the inside, that's the guide bushing. And it has holes in it, fluid is allowed to pass in and out of it. Just make sure you have them in the right orientation and order whenever you go to reinstall it. Here, I'm just cutting the rest of the old boot off. We're going to be replacing the boot, so we don't gotta worry about saving it. So my backup ring had a little chip in it. I can only assume that it got pressed into the stopper ring and broke off, and that's why I had so much difficulty in removing mine. Hopefully yours won't. But that is the seal itself. And then inside there is the guide bushing with all those holes on the inside. But on the oil seal it has a metal ring that's visible, and that goes up top. Here I'm doing my best to clean everything as I go. You don't want dirt in the seals or anything. It can cause scratches and cause leaks. So I'm just doing the best job I can at trying to clean everything. This is the guide bushing, again the one with the holes in it. First thing to install. So again, in the spirit of keeping things clean, I'm going to go ahead and put a shirt down. Next, you want to tape the top part of the shock. I'm just using electrical tape right here. It's got those welds on it, and the welds should be smooth, but even the shop manual says to tape off the top before you put the seal on, just to prevent the seal from getting scratched. It's always good practice to follow the shop manual when available. Here's that Honda part number. I got this one off of Partzilla, I believe. And like I said, I think it was in between $20 to $40. Right here, I am using ATF as my suspension fluid. Honda recommends the SS7, but I've always used ATF on shocks. So, 140 cc's, 4.7 US ounces, or 4.9 imperial ounces. I pour a little bit of ATF inside the cap, and I can apply the seal with my fingers. It just helps lubricate it a little bit. Helps get that seal to really start sealing like it's supposed to. I do the same thing whenever I rebuild like master cylinders for brakes and stuff. I'll do a little brake fluid in the cap and all the rubber parts, get a nice little good coating. But again, the metal part of the seal is what goes up. It's what goes to the outside. And then you just slide it down. So here, you just got to get to the 240 cc's or get to the 4.7 ounces. So you just got to find a vessel and you just got to do some basic math. A cc is equivalent to a milliliter, so 1 cc is equal to 1 milliliter. So that is just something to take into consideration. But once you get it measured out, and again I'm going to have to do 2 of these, you just pull your shock up and then you dump some fluid in. Make sure that your adapter or bolt is still in there at this point, otherwise it will all drain out. And as you can see, I'm just moving the shock up and down to get some of the air bubbles out. You want to do this slowly. You don't want to burp it too fast or it will get ATF everywhere. Again, as you can see, the seal is on top. The only thing that's down inside the shock right now is the guide bushing, but it does have the holes in it, so you know it's fine to burp it and everything with the guide bushing inside. You don't have to fill it up before. It'd probably go quicker if you waited to install the guide bushing, because you are having to burp it like this, but it's not a big deal if you do install the guide bushing like I did, and then you have to pour the ATF or suspension fluid in. But again, you just need to get to that 140 cc's/ml mark, and then just keep on burping. There's that guide bushing I was telling you about. So I put all the fluid required in the shock, the 140 cc's. So now I'm getting some fresh ATF or suspension fluid, rubbing it all around the outside, and that's again just going to help promote a good seal. So you want to lubricate the outside and you want to lubricate the inside. Here I'm just pressing it down with my fingers as much as possible. Honda also sells a seal press, which I do not have. They were also pretty ridiculous as well, kind of like the oil seal remover pumps. So how are we going to install this seal? Well, let me show you. So that backup ring, the full metal backup ring, you're just going to install that after you do the seal. And again, the wider opening goes towards the bottom. You can see that little thinner lip that goes towards the top. And hopefully yours isn't cracked like mine was. Again, I just think that's why my stopper ring was so difficult to remove. But here, I'm just giving it some nice light and gentle taps. And this is going to help push the seal down into the shock. You want to do nice gentle taps all around it. Again, do not carve a gouge into the shock. Here's that oil seal driver I was telling you about. But I do not have one of those. And I am just slowly working my way all around it, so that way it doesn't get in a bind. And this process actually worked really well. This didn't take long at all. Just doing some nice gentle taps. I ended up getting me a smaller screwdriver though. That last one I had was kind of thick. And again, don't scratch the inside of the shock. You don't want leaks. That's why we're doing this. My thought behind doing this was, you know, it's a $20 to $40 seal versus $150 to $200 for a cheaper shock to replace it with. So I figured, man, it'd be worth the money. Just try to rebuild this instead of just throw it away. So even if I did damage it beyond repair and I wasn't able to use it, it was still only out $20 to $30. But now to install the stopper ring, I'm just using a thin flat blade screwdriver, and there is that ring that you can see on the outside of the shock right there, and that's what the stopper ring goes into. Just want to use a flat blade screwdriver, press it in. And there, as you see, it moves freely, and then whenever you pull it up a lot, again, there's no hose attached to it, so you'd expect it to go back down, and it does perfectly. We don't have oil leaking out. So now time to put this boot on. This is an aftermarket boot, SA 1997 Monroe Shockmate shock absorber bellow. This one was a little tight, but looking on the old Goldwing forums, this was the closest thing that anyone's found to, you know, fitting correctly. I'm using rubbing alcohol, and I'm just going to clean around the shock so that way you get a good seal. You want this as tight to the shock as possible so that way it doesn't allow dirt in. The point of a shock boot is to allow the shock to move up and down and not allow dirt in, because again, dirt can cause scratches and get in between the seals and cause leaks. So now the fun part, this was me just forcing it on. Like I said, this one doesn't fit perfectly, and it does take some muscles and maneuvering to get it to fit properly. Here I'm using tape just to kind of get a little bit better grip on the rubber. Just something that my fingers can grab a little better on, and just pulling it up as far as I can get it. I'm not going to trim this at all. I'm just going to leave it scrunched up. And it came with one zip tie, but I went ahead and did another one. So again, once you get it pulled up adequately, throw a few zip ties on it. At the bottom I compressed it as much as possible. And then I got the zip tie on the very bottom of that circular piece. This is how it should look completed. So as you see, the zip tie is down there at the bottom. It's not going to come off. We've got 2 zip ties up top. Go ahead and cut the zip ties. Take that adapter off of your air hose and install it back to where it goes. And you are done. I did include a little tip to utilize when installing it at the 22-minute mark, but this is just me fitting it in there. So now for that tip I was telling you about, you can use an air compressor and you can use a blowgun with a rubber tip going inside that hole right there, and you can use that to expand the shock to get that bolt to properly seat on the bottom. Once you get everything built, it can be kind of stiff just because it has the fluid and everything else in there. So I'm using an air gun to actually expand the shock. Again, this is an air shock, so this isn't going to damage it. Also, we're not getting any fluid leaking or anything like that, so that is a good thing. But that's a little tip you can do. And as you can see, it's moving the rear wheel, so this has worked. Thanks again for watching. This is Octane Restorations. This is how to rebuild the rear air shock on a GL1500, a 1988 through 2000. There's not going to be much difference between the years. If you like the video, go ahead and comment and subscribe. Get more content like this. And thanks again for watching. It really does help. You have a good rest of your day. See you later.